Okay, running a quick audio test to see if everything's up and running, ready to go. I'm also going into YouTube and making sure that the live stream is in the proper playlist since I am streaming off of Rumble too. Audio sounds good on there. I'm not going to run through and do an audio test on everything, considering I'm 15 minutes late to the show, and need to get this stuff up and going. So I'm going to try to be as quick as I possibly can about this. So let me go ahead and get get to where I need to be to start the episode. So all right. It's so hard to believe that I'm already up this far on uh, on the episodes. To be honest with you, I'm completely amazed by that, and I do have I should have all of my notes and everything ready for the rest of the season. We're already up to episode 9. It looks like so. Let me do, take a drink of my coffee like I usually do, and then I'll do a countdown for editing purposes, and then I'll get on with the show, get everything started. So um, first, let me hit refresh on Rumble, see if Rumble's up. There it is. Okay, let me hear what that audio sounds like. It sounds kind of choppy in the back. That's the sound of my air conditioner going, just so you guys know. Okay, here we go. Three, two, one, now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the wonderful world of weirdness. I'm Roger Hanson, and I'll be your host for another episode of Esoteric Agenda here on Wednesday, I believe, at midnight. Yes, it's the first of my series that I've finally decided to do at midnight, and I do have to say I've been enjoying it quite a bit. Actually, I've actually enjoyed my episodes of Esoteric Agenda more than what I had the other ones, and that's even more than the conspiracies too. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and say a few things before I start into the topic. Now, I want to point something out to people just so they know, like the stuff that I'm actually putting out to you guys is basically what real uh, esoterics are, what the esoterics really are. And that concerns alchemy as well. Now, a lot of people don't really understand what the concept is when they hear the words esoteric. You know, you'll hear people always say esoteric, exoteric, and give you that spiel. Okay, we know what that means by definition, but we're being real here. You know, this is esoteric beliefs, the mystery schools, all of that. And I've always been fascinated in the esoterics. I've studied this stuff for well over 10 years now. I've always been fascinated with history as well. So that was kind of two things that melded together when it came to the stuff that I've been interested in when it comes to history and the esoterics. Kind of fit together like a hand in glove, you know. So let me get on with what I was saying. that's basically how I am. So when you hear me talk here, and I talk about alchemy and I talk about the esoterics, I'm giving you the real deal. This is the original concept of what the esoterics were. Now, last week I said some stuff that I changed my mind about. I said that I wasn't going to get too much into modern um, uh, hermetics when it came to the Masons Guild and everything. And then I stopped and I thought about it afterwards, after I said that on the stream. And I thought to myself, well, it wouldn't be right if I didn't actually you know, do that. Start discussing the Masons, and so I'm gonna do that in this episode. I'm going to make it just one episode, though. I'm not going to make 2 or 3 episodes on just the Freemasons, but I will tell you some stuff that you probably haven't heard. I'm going to tell you some stories that are older than stories that you've heard. This is the original stories that the Freemasons started out with, and then I will go on farther after this episode, and we'll be talking about people like Al Kendi and more in-depth research that surrounds the esoterics. So, with that being said, I guess I can get on with the show. Let me double check, make sure that audio is good. All right, it sounds decent. I'll get with it. So here we go. In a time when the great rivers of the earth nourished the first civilizations, there arose in Egypt a people who looked to the heavens and the earth and sought to understand their own order. The Nile, flowing through their lands, brought life and rhythm, and with each flood and ebb, the boundaries of the world shifted. This constant change forced the Egyptians to measure, to define, to reclaim their space from the waters. It was through this necessity that geometry was born, not as an abstract science, but as a living response to the environment. Among these early thinkers and priests, there was a deep reverence for the patterns of nature. They believed that the world had been fashioned by divine principles, and to study the forms of the earth was to seek the mind of the divine itself. Their temples were built in harmony with the stars, their moments aligned with celestial events, and their symbols carried layers of meanings tied to the eternal cycles of life. In this fertile land of stone and symbol, the foundations of geometry were laid. The priests of Egypt developed systems to measure fields, build pyramids, and calculate the movement of heavenly bodies. They recorded their knowledge in scrolls and passed it down through generations in the schools of temple scribes. Geometry was not merely practical, it was sacred. It bridged the divine and the human, the ideal and the real. It was into this world that Euclid would one day be born, though his exact origins remained hidden in the mists of antiquity. Some say he lived in the time of Ptolemaic Alexandria, a city that gathered the knowledge of the world into its libraries and taught scholars from every land. Others whispered that he carried with him the wisdom of an earlier age, drawn from the ancient Nile and shaped by the hands of the priestly architects. Euclid did not invent geometry, but he did something perhaps even more profound. He distilled the sacred knowledge of generations into coherent, ordered system. Hold on a minute. Got to make sure this is going. Stop for a minute. He gave form to the formless and structure to the known. In his work, often known as the Elements, he laid out principles that could be applied not just to the land but to the mind. From points and lines to shapes and solids, he built a ladder of understanding that would endeavor for ages. The very act of defining a point, a line, or a plane was revolutionary. For in naming these things, he invited others to see with clarity and to think with precision. His axioms were single, yet from them rose a universe of form and function. And though he taught in Alexandria, his spirit was rooted in the temples of Egypt, in the shadow of obelisks and beneath the gaze of the Sphinx. Geometry in Euclid's vision was not limited to practical measurement. It was a way of discerning truth. It was logic embodied in form and beauty expressed through proportion. The harmony that the Egyptians saw in the stars and the cycles of the Nile found new voice in Euclid's definitions and proofs. And so the sacred science of Egypt found continuity in the philosophical clarity of Greece. In the mystery traditions that later emerged, Euclid's geometry became a hidden path. The compass and square, the triangle and the circle were no longer just tools of architecture. They became symbols of moral and spiritual principles. To draw a perfect circle was to echo the perfection of the divine. To bisect the angle was to seek balance between opposites. The lines drawn upon papyrus were mirrored in the invisible structures of the soul. The legacy of Euclid's Egyptian inheritance did not end with antiquity. It passed into the hands of Roman builders, Arab mathematicians, and medieval scholars. It shaped the cathedrals of Europe and the hidden teachings of secret societies. In the days before the Great Deluge, long before the memory of man and the rise of the kingdoms that would later carve the world into empires, there lived a family descended from the ancient line of Cain. Among them was a man named Lamech, and unto him were born children whose minds were gifted by the heavens. Each child possessed a particular genius, and together they shaped the knowledge and tools of the earliest human civilization. It was said that they were not only wise in the art of earth, but also understood the signs of the heavens, the songs of the winds, and the measure of the stars. Jabal, the oldest son, became the master of husbandry. He tamed the wild beast and taught the people to dwell in tents, fashioning shelter from the earth and skies. His brother Jubal was drawn to harmony, to the rhythm of breath and the music of the waters, and he brought forth the lyre and the harp. Through his hands, music came into the world, giving the people joy and peace. Tubal Cain, the youngest son, was a smith of unparalleled skill. He discovered the secrets of forging iron and brass, creating tools to till the land and weapons to defend it. Nama, their sister, became the mother of weaving and the gentle arts, and through her the first garments were spun upon looms. These four, under the watchful guidance of their father, gathered knowledge not only of practical craft but also of the hidden workings of the world. They studied the stars and the movement of the heavens, recorded the cycles of the moon and the turning of the seasons, and understood the art of measurement and the harmony of proportions. What they discovered was precious, for it gave form and structure to the world around them, and with it they built the foundations of all human learning. But as they looked upon the world they were shaping, a shadow crept across their thoughts. The elders had passed down whispers of prophecies and omens, and the signs that they now observed with their own eyes warned of destruction. From their communion with the heavens they learned that the world might one day be consumed by fire or swallowed by water. This twin threat of annihilation stirred fear in their hearts, not for themselves, but for the legacy of wisdom they had cultivated. They knew that knowledge, if not preserved, would vanish with the ruin of the earth, and mankind would return to the darkness from whence it came. So the children of Lamech resolved upon a mighty task. They would create two pillars upon which to inscribe the totality of their discoveries. The full measure of their arts and science, so that even if calamity befell the world, the seeds of knowledge would survive. One pillar they fashioned from the hardest marble, impervious to the fury of flame. The other they molded from burnt clay and brick, hardened to resist the ravages of water. Each was raised to a great height and set upon the plain where the stars were clearest, that they might be easily found in the ages to come. Upon these pillars they carved the secrets of geometry, the sacred patterns of the stars, the art of agriculture, and the weaving of cloth, the forging of tools, and the building of shelters. They recorded the laws of balance, the harmony of sound, the cycles of sun and moon, and the rules of upright conduct. With reverence, solemnity, they inscribed the names of the heavenly bodies, the sacred numbers that governed all things, and the measure of land and stone. They did not merely record facts, but offered these truths with the spirit of instruction, hoping that those who discovered the pillars would also inherit the wisdom of their hearts. When the work was completed, the family stood before the twin monuments, gazing upon their work. The winds were still, and the sky bore witness with stars so bright that they seemed to nod in approval. With hands uplifted they offered a prayer to the divine, beseeching the preservation of the pillars through whatever devastation might come. Then they returned to their lives, knowing they had done all they could to preserve the light of knowledge. Generations passed, and the face of the world changed. Great rains fell, and the rivers swelled. The waters rose beyond their bounds and swept over the valleys and the hills. The great deluge, as had been foretold, came upon the earth. Cities and farms were lost beneath the waves. Forests vanished and mountains wept. Those who survived carried the memory of the past only in fragments, whispers of a time before the flood. Tales handed down with trembling voices around flickering fires. In time the waters receded and the land was made new. Tribes wandered the plains once more, and new generations rose from the ashes of the old. Among them were seekers and builders, men who felt drawn to understand the world, just as the children of Lamech had. They studied the skies, they measured the land, and in their wandering they came upon a strange and ancient thing. There, half buried in earth and overgrown with vines, stood one of the pillars. Though weathered, the markings upon the surface were still visible. The seekers knew at once that they had found something sacred. They cleared the earth from around the pillar, brushed away the dust of ages, and began to study the inscriptions. The characters were unfamiliar, but the symbols and figures spoke to them in dreams and visions. Slowly they began to understand. They learned how to build with balance and proportion, how to trace the lines of a triangle with string and stake, how to tune an instrument to echo the song of the stars. They discovered that this knowledge made them stronger and more just, that their cities flourished and their laws became wise. The story of the pillar spread, and it became a legend. Those who followed the ways inscribed upon it became builders and lawgivers, priests and sages. They built temples aligned with the stars and laid roads as straight as the rays of the sun. The knowledge they gained was preserved in new scrolls, in the hearts of new generations, and in the rituals of those who remembered the pillar. It was said that the second pillar still lay hidden, that its discovery would one day complete the legacy of the children of Lamech. Many searched for it, and some claimed to have glimpsed it in visions, or seen it buried in sand or stone. But the tale held more than a call to archaeology. It was a call to uphold the virtues of wisdom, diligence, and foresight. The two pillars became symbols of strength and endurance, of fire and water, of destruction and rebirth. When the builders of Solomon's temple erected its entrance, they raised two pillars in memory of the ancient ones. They named them to signify establishment and strength. And through these pillars passed all who would enter the house of wisdom. Their names were known to those initiated into the deeper mysteries, and their meaning was carried forward in the teachings of geometry and sacred measure. The story of the children of Lamech, as drawn from the Cook manuscript, presents a deeply symbolic and mytho-historical tradition that had a powerful influence on the early development of Masonic legend and allegory. This manuscript, one of the oldest known documents associated with early Freemasonry, outlines a vision of human history that merges biblical genealogy with the preservation of sacred knowledge. Within this tradition, the children of Lamech are portrayed not merely as historical or mythical characters, but as initiators and guardians of ancient wisdom, the first progenitors of the arts and sciences that would eventually form the foundation of civil society. Lamech is a figure from the early chapters of Genesis, and he is known for his sons and daughter, each of whom possessed a particular talent or domain. The Cook manuscript expands on the biblical narrative by attributing to each child a special gift, skill, or domain of expertise, transforming them from passive biblical characters into dynamic agents of human development. The manuscript celebrates Jubal, Tubal-Cain, and Nama, not only as inventors or founders of specific arts, but as preservers of those arts for future generations. Jubal, the oldest son, is described as the father of those who dwell in tents and raise cattle. He is credited for this narrative with the discovery of agriculture and animal husbandry, making him as a civilizing force. The manuscript presents Jubal as the first to teach men how to live in organized communities, cultivate the land, and domesticate animals for human benefit. Through this labor, he helps humanity rise from a state of primitive wandering and settled life. In Masonic allegory, Jubal can be interpreted as a symbol of stability, stewardship, and the art of organizing life around communal values. Jubal, his brother, is held as the father of music. He is said to have discovered the art of playing the harp and the organ, thereby bringing harmony and rhythm into human experience. Jubal is associated with the inner life of man, the emotional and spiritual aspects of culture, and the power of sound to uplift and inspire. Music, as introduced by Jubal, is portrayed not just as an entertainment, but as a means of tuning the soul to the divine order. His contribution introduces a sacred geometry of sound, echoing themes later developed in both mysticism and the liberal arts, particularly in the quadrivium of medieval education, where music and mathematics are ultimately connected. Tubal-Cain is the third son, and he is credited with the discovery of metallurgy. He taught the forging of brass and iron, crafting tools and weapons, and establishing the foundations of craftsmanship. Tubal-Cain becomes a symbol of transformation through fire, of turning raw elements into instruments of progress or destruction. His art speaks to the power of knowledge as a double-edged force and the importance of ethical responsibility in technological advancement. Within Masonic tradition, Tubal-Cain stands as a forefather of the master craftsman, one who understands both the material and the symbolic value of his work. Nama the daughter of Lamech is often overlooked in other traditions, but the Cook manuscript gives her a dignified place. She is credited with the invention of weaving in textile arts. Her contributions her contributions to domestic craft are elevated to cultural achievements, reflecting the belief that even the seemingly mundane aspects of life carry sacred significance. Nama, in this context, becomes a figure of nurturing wisdom, of practical skill tied to beauty and utility. Her inclusion in the manuscript affirms that both men and women played roles in the development of the civil arts and the preservation of knowledge. Perhaps the most enduring and esoteric element of this tradition lies in what the children of Lamech do to ensure that their knowledge is not lost. Forewarned of the coming catastrophe that could either be a flood or a fire, the children devise a way to preserve their arts. They construct the two great pillars. One was made of stone, resistant to fire. The other is made of brick, impervious to water. Upon these pillars they inscribed all the knowledge of their discoveries, including the sciences, arts, and divine laws. This act becomes a foundational myth in Freemasonry, representing the eternal duty to safeguard and transmit wisdom. These pillars echo earlier traditions of sacred architecture and symbolic geometry. They are reminiscent of the pillars of Boaz and Jachin in Solomon's temple, and more broadly of the ancient belief that knowledge must be stored in durable, sacred forms. The dual materials of the pillars reflects a dual nature of the threats to knowledge, from both elemental destruction and human forgetfulness. In constructing them, the children of Lamech participate in a divine act of remembrance and preservation. The survival of the knowledge inscribed on the pillars ties directly to the transmission of wisdom in Masonic tradition. After the flood, the pillars are rediscovered, and the knowledge they contain is said to be read and passed down. This becomes a metaphor for the rediscovery of ancient truths in every generation. For Freemasons, this symbolizes the recovery of lost knowledge, the pursuit of moral and philosophical enlightenment, and the continuity of sacred traditions. This legend aligns with the broader esoteric narrative that human civilization is not simply a product of evolutionary development, but the result of deliberate instruction by enlightened beings, often portrayed as culture heroes or semi-divine figures. The children of Lamech in this frame represents a divine spark in early humanity, one that calls us to develop ourselves, our community, and our relationship with the divine order. Their story becomes not just a tale of invention, but a call to responsibility to uphold and expand upon the arts they first brought forth. The influence of this story on later Masonic ritual and symbolism is profound. The idea of the builder, the artisan, and the keeper of sacred secrets finds its prototype in these early figures. The division of arts into the practical, the musical, the architectural, and the domestic all mirror the liberal arts and the duties of the various degrees within the craft. Even the notion of dual pillars, foundational to many Masonic lodges, is enriched by this narrative. These are not mere structural supports, but bearers of the ancient and eternal truths that all initiates are called to seek. In this story, the story of Lamech's children does not just point backwards to a mythic past, but serves as an archetype for human potential. Each of the children represents a facet of human capacity: the farmer and shepherd who nurtures the land, the musician who stirs the soul, the smith who shapes matter with fire, and the weaver who clothes and comforts the community. Together they form a complete picture of what it means to be human in a sacred order, to live in harmony with nature, society, and the divine. Their decision to preserve their discoveries in the indestructible pillars is equally significant. It reflects a key philosophical tenet that wisdom must not only be not only attained, but preserved and passed on. This preservation is not only physical in terms of monuments or buildings, but also spiritual, requiring moral discipline and inner enlightenment. The pillars symbolize the eternal principles that undergird civilization and spirituality, reminding initiates that they, too, are stewards of ancient wisdom. The story of the beginnings of geometry, particularly as it relates to the figure of Euclid in the land of Egypt, is deeply woven into both mathematical history and Masonic legend. While modern academic tradition places Euclid as a Greek mathematician in the city of Alexandria during the Hellenistic period, Masonic and esoteric traditions often extend his roots deeper into Egyptian antiquity. These traditions do not always seek historical accuracy, but rather symbolic continuity, linking geometry, the foundation of architecture, to moral and spiritual truth. This article explores both the intellectual contributions attributed to Euclid and the mystical and practical associations of geometry with ancient Egypt. Geometry, from its very name meaning earth measurement, is thought to have originated in Egypt as a pragmatic response to the annual flooding of the Nile. The waters would wash away land boundaries, and Egyptian surveyors were required to restore property divisions with accuracy and consistency. This necessity gave rise to a systematic approach to measuring land angles and distances. The priests and scribes of Egypt, who functioned as scholars, began developing rules and patterns that enabled them to apply measurement and calculations effectively. The use of ropes knotted at equal intervals, often carried by rope stretchers, formed rudimentary triangles and laid the foundation for an empirical knowledge of spatial relationships. These practices formed the experiential basis of what would later be systemized into the formal discipline of geometry. It is in this historical and symbolic context that Euclid emerges. Though he lived in Alexandria several generations after its founding by Alexander the Great, Euclid's Elements become the most influential mathematical textbook in history. Rather than discovering geometry, Euclid synthesizes and organized it, drawing upon the knowledge of earlier mathematicians, including those of Egyptian and Babylonian origin. Euclid developed a deductive system in which all geometric truths were derived from a small set of self-evident axioms and postulates. The result was a coherent and logically rigorous structure that could be applied not only to the measurement of physical space, but also to abstract reasoning. The legend that Euclid learned his art in Egypt predates modern scholarly inquiry and was embraced by both medieval thinkers and early Masonic writers. In these traditions, Egypt is portrayed as the cradle of all learning, a place where divine knowledge was preserved in temples and transmitted through sacred rites. Geometry, as the art that underlies all building and measurement, was considered a divine science, its principles reflecting the order of the cosmos. In this frame, Euclid is not just a mathematician, but a transmitter of sacred knowledge, one who organizes and preserves a divine gift. In the Regius manuscript, one of the oldest Masonic texts written in poetic form, Euclid is said to have taught geometry to the children of noblemen in Egypt and established rules of moral conduct and professional ethics alongside his technical instruction. This poetic narrative links geometry not only to spatial skill, but to wisdom, integrity, and social harmony. In this version of the story, Euclid is a cultural hero who uses geometry to impose order on both physical and moral worlds. He is revered as the archetype of the teacher. The geometry is elevated from a technical art to a moral science. The fascination with Egypt as the origin of geometry also stems from its monumental architecture. The construction of the pyramids, temples, and the obelisks would have required advanced knowledge of measurement, alignment, and engineering. The The alignment of the pyramids to celestial bodies, the use of the golden ratio, and the application of square angles and precise orientation all suggest a profound understanding of geometric principles. These achievements fed the myth that Egyptian priests held the key to universal knowledge and that geometry was not merely practical but also mystical. Euclid's Elements begin with the definitions, postulates, and common notations. From these, he derives he derives propositions that build upon one another in a logical sequence. The beauty of this method lies in its clarity and permanence. Once a truth is proven within the system, it remains true for all time. In this way, geometry became the model for deductive reasoning, and Euclid's text became the cornerstone of education in the liberal arts for centuries. Philosophers, scientists, and builders alike found in elements a language for understanding structure, order, and logic. Freemasonry absorbed the symbolism of geometry through allegory and ritual. The square and compass, essential tools of the Mason, became emblems of virtue and self-control. The square represented honesty and upright behavior, while the compass signified the boundary of action and desire. In this symbolic symbol, geometry is not merely a practical discipline, but a path to moral and spiritual refinement. The legacy of Euclid is thus recast through a spiritual lens, where the clarity of geometric truth mirrors the clarity of moral insight. Egypt in this tradition is more than a geographical location. It is an allegoric space, a place in ancient initiation of secret knowledge hidden beneath layers of symbol and ritual. In the mystery traditions of the Mediterranean world, Egypt held the status of a sacred land where the soul journeyed through trials and purification. In Masonic tradition, to say that Euclid taught geometry in Egypt is to say that he participated in the sacred lineage of knowledge and brought forth a system that mirrored the divine order. The concept of harmony, central to both geometry and music, was also tied to Egypt. The belief that the movement of the heavens followed geometric principles led to the idea of the music of the spheres, where celestial bodies produced a harmony inaudible to the human ear, but perceivable through reason. Geometry thus became a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds, capable of revealing the underlying unity of all things. Euclid, in organizing the truths of geometry, was seen as unveiling the hidden structure of the cosmos. In more esoteric traditions, geometry was also associated with creation itself. The act of drawing a circle with a compass or forming a square with a rule mirrored the act of divine creation. The builder became a reflection of the divine architect. In this view, the study of geometry was an act of worship, a contemplation of the divine design embedded in the world. The shapes and proportions used in sacred architecture were believed to hold symbolic power, capable of aligning human consciousness with higher realities. Euclid's influence extended beyond mathematics into philosophy and theology. Thinkers such as Plato regarded geometry as a path to higher understanding. The entrance to Plato's Academy famously bore the inscription, "Let none ignorant of geometry enter here." For Plato, the clarity and permanence of geometric forms reflected the eternal world of ideas. The physical world was a shadow of this ideal realm, and geometry provided a means to apprehend it. The blending of Platonic philosophy with Egyptian symbolism gave rise to a tradition in which geometry became a sacred science. This tradition was preserved and elaborated upon through various schools of thought, including the Neoplatonists, Hermeticists, and later the speculative Masons. Each group saw in geometry a means of ascent, a ladder by which the soul could rise from ignorance to illumination. The figure of Euclid therefore occupied a unique place at the intersection of rational science and sacred tradition. His Elements serve both as a textbook for students and as a symbolic template for those seeking higher knowledge. Whether viewed as a historical mathematician or as a mythical sage, Euclid's legacy endures in the structures of thought and the temples of stone. In modern times, the practical use of geometry as engineering, architecture, and science continue to expand. Yet the symbolic dimensions of the disciplines remain relevant. The act of measuring, the act of measuring, of drawing straight lines and true angles still evoke ideas of justice, balance, and cosmic order. The tools of the Mason remain symbols of inner development, and the teaching of Euclid remain a foundation for both technical and moral instructions. All right. So yeah, I wanted to go through and do this. This is some of the older stuff that was this was the older original stuff that the Freemasons used as their tenets, I guess you call them. I forgot what they're called, but it's their rights. That was before Hiram Abiff even. They used these. And in my last episode, I did the sacred tree. And that's another part of it too. There's a lot of older stories of the Freemasons that you can find that relates to the pillars, and that there's also the story I told you about the tree, or the wood, the sacred wood from the Garden of Eden. That's another one that I did at the end of the last episode if you guys want to check that out. Now these are actually older, like I was saying, and the Children of Lamech is something that a lot of people who are even into the esoterics aren't even aware of. This is the gold nugget. If you're watching this video and you've listened to this, then you've heard something that I'd say 80% of the people who are into the esoterics don't know anything about. So I actually found this out because I'm really into this stuff and I do a lot of research into it. And I was lucky enough to stumble upon this. There's also a story too. I believe it's from the Scottish Rite, but it concerns the Stone of Scones and Rolling Stones. That's something that you might want to get into. That's kind of interesting because of the band, the Rolling Stones, and just the term Rolling Stone, where that came from. That's actually an old Masonic story as well, about how the Stone of Scones came to be, and the history behind that. maybe later on I'll pull that up. But like I said, I don't want to get too much into talking about the Freemasons and things of that nature because there's so much more that's involved with the esoterics than just talking about the Freemasons or the Rosicrucians. There, I believe that a lot of people really miss the boat because they get caught up in that, and there's a deeper history behind it that goes farther than that, and alchemy too, especially. Which here after this, I am going to start. This is actually the eighth episode. Now that I think about it, yeah. So then, starting with the ninth episode, is things are going to start getting even deeper than what it was. I'm going to get into the Brethren of Purity. Now this is back when things were just starting out. You're going to start hearing about the brothers the Brethren of Purity, and then I'm going to start getting into people like Al Kendi. Now Al Kendi, he was an intellectual, but during his time and even a while after that, a lot of people didn't know that he was also uh, interested in the mystics, the esoterics, and he wrote a lot of stuff pertaining to the mystics and the esoterics. And um, he, uh, he would get scolded quite a bit about about his beliefs, his esoteric and mystical beliefs, because back then in the Arab world, intellectuals weren't supposed to be like that. You weren't supposed to think like an intellectual and then uh, believe in mystical beliefs. That was just uncalled for to a lot of them. So it caused him a lot of grief, but he still continued to write his writings, and a lot of the things that he wrote is what eventually inspired alchemists and mystics in the Middle Ages. Um, there's a whole story behind that that I might be able to get into. I'm not quite sure. Now, another thought too that I wanted to bring up before I ended this is a lot of people need to understand something about alchemy. Now, it's about the Philosopher's Stone. Now, I know that a lot of people don't really understand what the full concept of alchemy is. They believe that it's turning metal into gold, and that's farthest from the truth. Okay, and you'll always hear them talk about the Philosopher's Stone. Now, let me point something out about the Philosopher's Stone. If alchemy was just about turning metal into gold, then the stone would not be named the Philosopher's Stone. It would be called, turning metal into stone, or into gold stone, or transmutation stone, or something like that. But it's not. Okay. This is what woke me up to the whole thing. It's called the Philosopher's Stone. Okay. Just keep that in mind when you think of alchemy, because a lot of people have given alchemy a bad name. It's not really as bad as what people have made it out to be, because it really isn't. It's actually interesting. There's a lot of intelligent philosophers that were involved in this who came up with a lot of good ideas and a lot of philosophies. And I just wanted to put that out there so people understand that that stone is called the Philosopher's Stone for a reason. So keep that in mind if you ever decide to check this stuff out. Trust me when I tell you, you will not regret it. This is some of the best literature I've ever read in my entire life, and I love reading. Okay, just I love reading. I love reading and writing. I just love it, And I can tell you right now, this is some beautiful stuff. So if you do, give it a try. Just do like I said. Remember it's the Philosopher's Stone, and keyword there, philosopher. So just keep that in mind. I would check all of the channels, but it is late. It's 1 or it's 11 minutes after 1 right now where I'm at, and I would love to check and see if there's anybody on, but right now I only have Rumble and YouTube up right now, even though I am um, on other channels. I don't even know if they're streaming, but we do have 2 viewers on YouTube, and I would like to thank them for being here this late at night. There's 4 people on Rumble. Thank you guys for showing up. Nobody made any comments, which is cool, because that means I don't have to answer any questions or talk to anybody in chat, and I love that. There's 3 people on X. Thank you guys for stopping in and watching. And Twitch never has anybody. It says 1, but I'm pretty sure they're talking about me. And on Kick, we have no viewers. And the reason why is because all the little children had to go to bed. It's a school day tomorrow, so they can't play their video games right now. So you guys have a good night and sleep. Sleep well, little boys and girls. Sleep well. And I believe that covers everything. So with that, all I can say is, again, thank you guys for stopping in and watching. If you liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share. Give a comment in the comment section. That would be greatly appreciated. I would ask you for your money, but I'm not going to pander, okay? But I do like money. If you guys have money, please just give it all to me if you want to. I love money, but I'll be okay with a comment in the comment section if you guys just want to do that. You know what I mean? I'm not picky. So, with that being said, happy 4th of July tomorrow, early ahead of time, and I hope you guys have fun. Just remember to be safe, and if you're drinking, have somebody drive for you. Okay? Don't drive alone, or don't drive drunk. If you guys go out, just remember to be responsible, and yeah, have a good time. I will talk to you later. You guys have a good night.